I found Doc Martinez sitting on the floor of the VA hospital corridor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by photographs and empty prescription bottles. He'd been my platoon sergeant in Afghanistan, the steady voice of reason who'd kept 20-year-old privates like me alive through countless patrols. Now he was 43 years old and looked like he'd aged 20 years since I'd last seen him at a reunion 5 years ago. "Doc," I said quietly, kneeling beside him. "Said you showed up asking for me, that you seemed off. What's going on?" He didn't look up, just kept staring at the photographs scattered around him. I recognized them, our platoon in Kandahar province, 2011. Young faces, most of us barely old enough to drink legally, trying to look tough in our combat gear. "They're all dead, Carter," Doc said, his voice flat. "Every single one of them except you and me, and I can't carry it alone anymore. I can't be the only one who remembers what really happened on that patrol." My blood ran cold. The patrol. Even after 12 years, I knew exactly which one he meant. October 17th, 2011. The day everything changed. The day Doc made us swear never to speak about what we'd seen, what we'd done, what we'd covered up. "Doc, we made a pact. We all agreed. Thompson's dead, suicide last month. Jenkins died in a car crash 2 years ago, though we both know it probably wasn't an accident. Rodriguez overdosed. Williams ate his gun. Sandoval drank himself to death." Doc finally looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. 7 of us made it back from that patrol. Now there's just you and me, and I'm not sure I'm going to make it much longer either. I sat down beside him, my back against the cold hospital wall. I'd spent 12 years trying not to think about that patrol, building a life and a family on a foundation of carefully maintained silence. And now Doc was threatening to tear it all down. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" "Because I'm dying anyway." He pulled up his shirt, showed me a scar from recent surgery. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less." And I realized I can't die carrying this secret alone. Someone has to know the truth. Someone has to remember what we did, even if we never tell another soul. We didn't do anything. We followed orders. We murdered civilians, Carter, covered it up. And we've been lying about it for 12 years. Doc's voice cracked. "And all those guys who killed themselves, they couldn't live with that lie. They're dead because of what we did that day. And I'm dying because I've spent 12 years eating myself alive with guilt." I wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the story we'd all agreed on, the official version that had been filed in reports and never questioned. But looking at Doc's face, at the photographs of dead friends, at the suicide note I could see partially hidden under one of the pictures, I realized he was right. The silence was killing us, had already killed most of us. "Tell me what you remember," I said quietly. "Let's compare our stories, see if we're carrying the same memory or if time has changed it." Doc gathered the photographs, arranging them carefully. Our platoon, 3rd Squad, Bravo Company. 23 of us had deployed to Kandahar, 18 had come home. Of those 18, only Doc and I were still alive, 12 years later. October 17th, 2011, Doc began. We were on a routine patrol through the villages north of our FOB. Hearts and Minds operation, trying to build rapport with locals, gather intelligence on Taliban movements. You remember the morning briefing? I did. Lieutenant Morrison had briefed us on the route, the villages we'd visit, the key leaders we'd meet with. Standard stuff. Nothing suggesting the day would end the way it did. We'd hit 3 villages by midday. Everything normal. Villagers were cautious but not hostile. We distributed some medical supplies, talked with the elders, moved on. Then we got to the 4th village, Tarnak. The name still made me flinch. Tarnak. A small village of maybe 200 people, mostly farmers and their families. We'd been there before without incident. The village elder wasn't there to meet us like usual, Doc continued. That should have been our first warning. Instead, we proceeded into the village center, started asking people where the elder was. And that's when the shooting started. I remembered. The crack of gunfire, the confusion, everyone scrambling for cover. We'd taken fire from multiple directions, rooftops, windows, alleyways, a coordinated ambush. We returned fire, I said, took defensive positions, called for air support and medevac, standard response to contact. That's what the after-action report says, Doc agreed. But that's not the whole truth, is it? No, it wasn't. The firefight lasted maybe 10 minutes, Doc continued. Then the shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. The insurgents melted away like they always did. And we were left standing in the village square with our weapons smoking and adrenaline pumping and no clear enemy to engage. We'd taken casualties, I said. Sandoval was hit in the shoulder. Jenkins took shrapnel to the leg. But everyone was alive, wounded but alive. And then Lieutenant Morrison ordered us to clear the buildings the fire had come from. Said we needed to search for weapons caches, confirm kills, secure the area, standard procedure. Doc's hands were shaking now. You and I were in the first team that entered the house on the north side of the square, the house where we'd definitely taken fire from the second-story window. I closed my eyes, but that just made the memory more vivid. The dark interior of the house, the smell of gunpowder and something else, something cooking. The sound of our boots on the stairs as we cleared room by room, weapons raised, ready for contact. We found them in the back bedroom, I said, my voice barely audible. 4 of them. 3 women and a teenage boy, cowering in the corner. The boy was holding an AK-47, crying. The women were screaming. And we just put God knows how many rounds through that room while returning fire. His voice broke. They weren't insurgents, Carter. They were a family hiding in their own home while a firefight happened around them. And the kid had grabbed his father's hunting rifle to protect his mother and sisters. But Lieutenant Morrison hadn't seen it that way. Morrison came in right after us, Doc continued. Saw the kid with the rifle. Saw the firing position by the window where someone had definitely shot at us from. And he made a decision. I felt sick remembering it. Morrison had looked at the terrified family, at the teenage boy with the rifle, at the room that showed signs of hasty defense. And he decided they were combatants. He ordered us to secure them for questioning, I said. Said the kid was obviously a fighter, that the women were probably spotters or sympathizers. Said we'd take them back to the FOB for processing. That's what he said in front of everyone, Doc agreed. But once the rest of the squad moved on to clear other buildings, once it was just Morrison, you, me, and Thompson in that room, he gave us different orders. This was it. The moment we'd all sworn never to speak about. The decision that had haunted 7 men to their deaths, and was now killing Doc and threatening to destroy me. He said they'd seen our faces, I whispered. Said the kid had fired on American troops, which made him a combatant regardless of age. Said the women would report our movements, compromise our operations, get more Americans killed. And he said the only way to neutralize the threat was to eliminate the witnesses. Eliminate, Doc spat. That's the word he used. Eliminate. Like they were threats instead of terrified civilians. Like murder becomes acceptable if you use the right euphemism. Thompson argued, I remembered. Said they were civilians. That we couldn't just execute them, that it was a war crime. And Morrison put his sidearm against Thompson's head and said anyone who didn't follow orders would be written up as a combat casualty, killed by enemy fire. The room fell silent. Even now, 12 years later, the horror of that moment was overwhelming. A U.S. Army lieutenant threatening to murder his own soldiers if they didn't help him murder civilians. So we did it, Doc said flatly. Because we were scared. Because we didn't want to die. Because in that moment, our own survival mattered more than their lives. Thompson shot the boy. I shot one of the women. You shot another. Morrison shot the third. And in less than 30 seconds, 4 people were dead. Then we staged it, I added, my voice hollow. Positioned the bodies to make it look like they'd been fighting. Fired more rounds to create evidence of a sustained firefight. Made it appear that we'd been engaged by hostiles and responded appropriately. Morrison wrote it up as 4 enemy KIA. Said the boy was a military-age male actively engaging U.S. forces, that the women were armed combatants supporting the attack. Said it was a clean shoot, fully justified. Doc laughed bitterly. And no one questioned it. Why would they? We were American soldiers. We wouldn't lie about something like that. We were the good guys, but we weren't the good guys. We were murderers who'd killed civilians and covered it up because a psychotic lieutenant had threatened us into compliance. When we got back to the FOB, Morrison gathered everyone who'd been in that house. You, me, Thompson, Williams, Jenkins, Rodriguez, and Sandoval. 7 of us who knew the truth. And he made us take an oath. I remember, I said. He said what happened in Tarnac stayed in Tarnac. That discussing it with anyone would be considered disclosure of classified combat operations. That anyone who violated the oath would face court-martial for compromising operational security. And we all agreed. Because we were complicit. Because we'd pulled the triggers. Because speaking up would mean admitting we'd murdered civilians, which would destroy our lives just as surely as if Morrison had shot us in that room. We sat in silence for a long time. The hospital corridor was quiet except for distant beeping of monitors and the hum of fluorescent lights. Outside, rain streaked down the windows, distorting the parking lot lights into abstract patterns. Thompson killed himself 8 years ago, Doc finally continued, drove his car off a bridge. His wife told me at the funeral that he'd been having nightmares, flashbacks, but refused to get help. Refused to talk about what was bothering him. Just spiraled deeper into depression until he couldn't take it anymore. I went to that funeral, I said. Stood there listening to people talk about Thompson's service, his bravery, his sacrifice, and I wanted to scream the truth, that he died because he couldn't live with what we'd done, that the real enemy wasn't the Taliban, it was the lie we'd been forced to carry. Williams lasted a bit longer. Made it 10 years before he ate his gun. Rodriguez overdosed. Maybe accidental, maybe not. Sandoval drank himself to death slowly over several years. Jenkins drove into a tree at high speed with no skid marks, which made me think he didn't even try to avoid it. Doc counted them off on his fingers. 7 of us made that oath. 5 are dead, and I've got 6 months left. Which leaves just you, Carter. You're the only one who's managed to build a life despite what we did. Managed? I felt anger rising. You think I've managed? I wake up screaming at least once a month. My wife thinks I have normal PTSD from combat. She has no idea it's because I murdered a teenage boy and 2 women, and then spent 12 years lying about it. I can't look at my own kids without seeing that family in Tarnock. I've been in therapy for years but can't tell the therapist the real story because I'm afraid of the oath Morrison made us take. Morrison, Doc said with disgust. You know what happened to him? He got promoted. Made captain, then major. Probably full bird colonel by now. Living his best life while 7 of his soldiers died carrying the secret he forced on us. Actually, Doc said quietly, Morrison's dead. Died 3 years ago. Heart attack. I went to his funeral. Stood in the back and listened to people praise his service, his leadership, his dedication. And I thought about telling everyone the truth right there. Grabbing the microphone and explaining what kind of leader Morrison really was. What he'd ordered us to do. What he'd threatened us with. Why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. Same reason I didn't refuse his order in Tarnock. Same reason I've kept silent for 12 years. I chose my own safety over truth, over justice, over the lives of those 4 people we murdered. Doc pulled out a letter from his jacket. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. I wrote this 6 months ago, when I got the diagnosis. It's a full confession, every detail about what happened in Tarnock. Names, dates, exact sequence of events. Evidence that contradicts the official after-action report. Proof that we lied. What are you going to do with it? That's why I called you here. That's why I needed to see you before. He trailed off. I want to send it to the Department of Defense, to the Inspector General, to journalists. Make sure the truth comes out before I die. But I can't do that without consulting you first. Because releasing this confession will destroy your life too. You'll face prosecution. Your family will know what you did. Your kids will learn their father is a war criminal. I felt like I couldn't breathe. For 12 years, I'd managed to compartmentalize what happened in Tarnock. Locked it away in a mental box and tried to live a normal life around it. And now Doc was threatening to blow that box wide open. You can't do this, I said. My wife, my kids, they'll be destroyed. I'll go to prison. Everything I've built will be gone. I know, and I'm sorry, but Thompson is dead. Williams, Rodriguez, Sandoval, Jenkins, all dead. They couldn't live with the lie, Carter. It killed them just as surely as if Morrison had pulled the trigger in that room. And I'm dying too. Cancer is eating me alive. And I think maybe it's psychosomatic. Maybe my body is trying to destroy the person who did what I did. So you want to take me down with you? Want to make sure I suffer too? No. Doc grabbed my arm. I want you to live, Carter. Really live. Not this half-life we've all been existing in, where we pretend everything's fine while the guilt slowly destroys us. I want one of us to survive this, to face the consequences, accept the punishment, and then maybe, finally, be free of the weight we've been carrying. That's not how it works. Confessing doesn't erase what we did, doesn't bring those people back. It just means we suffer publicly instead of privately. Maybe, but at least we'd be suffering honestly. At least their families would know what really happened. At least the world would know that 4 civilians died in Tarnock on October 17, 2011, not because they were insurgents, but because a psychotic officer ordered their execution and 7 soldiers were too afraid to refuse. I stood up, started pacing the corridor. My mind was racing, trying to find a way out of this nightmare that didn't end with everything I'd built crashing down. What if we just let it die with you? I said, you keep the letter, don't send it. Take the secret to your grave. I promise I'll remember. I'll honor the memory of those people we killed. But we don't destroy our families by going public. I've been telling myself that for 6 months, Doc said, that I'd just take it to the grave. Let you be the only survivor, the only one who remembers. But then I started thinking about Thompson and Williams and all the others who killed themselves rather than keep living with the lie. And I realized that silence isn't protection. It's poison. It's what's been killing us all along. So what? Confession is supposed to save me. Making everything public is supposed to give me peace? I don't know what will save you, Carter. Maybe nothing can. Maybe we're all damned regardless of what we do now. But I know that 6 men are dead because they tried to carry this silently, and I'm not going to let that silence kill you too. I stopped pacing and looked at Doc. Really looked at him. He was dying, wasting away from cancer and guilt and 12 years of carrying unbearable weight, and he wasn't trying to destroy me, he was trying to save me in the only way he knew how. Tell me what you need from me, I said quietly. What do you want me to do? I want you to read the letter, add your own testimony if you want, confirm the story or correct any details I got wrong. And then I want you to decide, do we send it or do I take it to my grave and leave you as the sole keeper of this secret? He handed me the letter, It was thick, maybe 20 pages, handwritten in Doc's careful script, a detailed confession of everything that had happened in Tarnak and the 12 years of cover-up that followed. "I'm not reading this here," I said. "I need time. Need to think about what this means for my family. Take all the time you need. I've got maybe 6 months. Take a few days, a week, whatever. Just give me an answer before I die. Tell me whether we're going to let the truth die with me or whether we're going to face the consequences of what we did." I took the letter and left the hospital, drove home in a daze, parked in my driveway, and sat in my truck for an hour trying to process what had just happened. Inside my house, my wife and kids were sleeping, peaceful and unaware that their entire world might be about to explode. Over the next week, I read Doc's letter dozens of times. Every detail was accurate. The date, the village, the firefight, Morrison's threats, the murders, the cover-up. It was a complete confession that would end any investigation quickly. We'd murdered 4 civilians and lied about it for 12 years. The evidence was clear. The guilt was undeniable. I thought about Thompson, about the funeral where people had praised his service while none of them knew the real reason he'd killed himself, about his widow, who'd spent years wondering why her husband had spiraled into depression and finally taken his own life. I thought about Williams, Rodriguez, Sandoval, Jenkins. 5 more men who'd died because they couldn't live with what we'd done. 5 families who'd grieved without understanding the real cause of death. And I thought about my own family. My wife, who knew I had PTSD but didn't know why. My kids, who deserved better than a father with a secret that poisoned everything he touched. My own mental health, which had been deteriorating for years despite therapy and medication and every attempt to move forward. Doc was right. The silence was killing us. Had already killed most of us. And unless something changed, it would eventually kill me too. Maybe not through suicide, maybe not through cancer, but through the slow erosion of everything that made life worth living. I called Doc on the 8th day. "I've made a decision," I told him. "I'm listening. We send the letter. We confess. We face whatever consequences come. Because you're right, carrying this silence is what's been destroying us. And I don't want to die the way Thompson and Williams died, unable to live with what we'd done. If confessing means prison, means my family learning the truth, means public shame and judgment, at least it means I'm finally being honest." Doc was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your life as you know it is over. My life as I know it is already over. I'm just pretending otherwise. At least this way, maybe I can build something real on the other side. Something not based on lies and cover-ups and 12 years of silence." "Okay," Doc said. "Okay, I'll send the letter tomorrow. To the Inspector General, to several journalists, to anyone who'll listen. And Carter, thank you for being brave enough to face this, for not making me die alone with this secret. We're brothers, Doc. We went through hell together. We murdered together. We lied together. The least we can do is face the consequences together." The letter went out 2 days later. And within a week, everything changed. Journalists started calling. The Inspector General opened an investigation. The Army announced they were reviewing the Tarnak incident. My face appeared on news websites alongside Doc's, identified as soldiers who'd confessed to murdering civilians in Afghanistan. My wife was devastated. Not just by what I'd done, but by 12 years of lies. By the fact that I'd let her believe my nightmares and anxiety were normal PTSD when they were actually guilt over murder. She took the kids and moved in with her parents while she decided whether our marriage could survive this. My employer put me on administrative leave pending the investigation. Neighbors stopped talking to me. Friends stopped calling. I became a pariah overnight, the veteran who'd committed war crimes and gotten away with it for 12 years. But something strange happened. As everything fell apart, as the life I'd carefully constructed crumbled around me, I felt lighter. The weight I'd been carrying for 12 years was finally being shared. The secret that had destroyed 6 men was out in the open where it couldn't poison us anymore. Doc died 6 weeks after the letter went public. Pancreatic cancer, just like he'd said. But he died having told the truth. Died knowing that the civilians we'd murdered in Tarnak would finally be acknowledged, that their deaths wouldn't just be covered up as enemy KIA forever. I testified at the investigation, confirmed every detail of Doc's letter, described Morrison's threats, the murders, the cover-up, named everyone involved, living and dead, held nothing back. The Army concluded that war crimes had been committed in Tarnak on October 17, 2011. They couldn't prosecute Morrison. He was dead. They couldn't prosecute Thompson, Williams, Rodriguez, Sandoval, or Jenkins, all dead. That left only me. I was charged with murder, lying to investigators, and conspiracy to cover up war crimes. I pled guilty to all charges. Didn't even try to defend myself or claim I'd been following orders under duress. Just acknowledged what I'd done and accepted responsibility for it. The military court sentenced me to 15 years in military prison. I'll be 60 when I get out. My kids will be grown. My marriage will almost certainly be over. The life I'd built will be gone. But I'm alive. Really alive, not the half-dead existence I'd been maintaining for 12 years. And for the first time since Tarnak, I can sleep without nightmares. Not because the guilt is gone. It will never be gone. But because I'm finally being punished for what I did. Finally facing consequences instead of hiding from them. Doc was right. The silence was killing us. And confession, as painful and destructive as it was, turned out to be the only path to survival. I think about Thompson sometimes. About how he might still be alive if we'd confessed 12 years ago. About Williams, Rodriguez, Sandoval, Jenkins, all the men who died because they couldn't live with the lie. And I think about the family in Tarnak. The teenage boy who grabbed his father's rifle trying to protect his mother and sisters. The 3 women who died in their own home. The lives we stole and then pretended didn't matter by classifying them as enemy KI. Their names are in the official record now. Their deaths are acknowledged as civilians killed by American forces, not insurgents killed in combat. It's not justice. Nothing can bring them back. But it's truth. And sometimes, truth is the only redemption available for unforgivable sins. 7 soldiers made a pact in 2011 to never speak about what happened in Tarnak. 6 are dead now. I'm the only one left. And I broke the pact because staying silent was deadlier than facing the truth. I'm writing this from military prison. I have 14 years left to serve. But I'm free in ways I haven't been since October 17, 2011. Sometimes confession isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a broken man can do. And sometimes the pact that was supposed to protect you is actually the thing that's killing you. Doc understood that in the end. And by breaking our silence, he saved my life. Even if it meant destroying everything else.